The hum of the city barely filtered through the thin walls of Aisha Carter's small apartment, a worn-out third-floor unit tucked above a shuttered laundromat on East Hamilton. The place was quiet except for the rhythmic whir of a ceiling fan and the soft breathing of her dog Lila, a German shepherd with tired eyes and the instincts of a soldier. Aisha sat on the edge of her couch, stroking Lila's fur, absent-mindedly eyes locked on the flickering television screen. Judge Raymond Holt's face filled the screen, his lips curled into that same smug smirk he always wore. Due to insufficient evidence, he said, dismissing the case with a bang of his gavel. The defendant, a young black man not much older than Jamal had been, looked devastated. Aisha's jaw clenched. She reached over and picked up a photograph from the coffee table, her brother Jamal frozen in time with his lopsided grin and untamed curls. The frame was cracked at the edge from one of the many times she'd held it too tightly. Her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. Courtroom 3B, tomorrow. Witness stand. Don't be late. She stared at it for a long moment. Lila growled, low ears pricking toward the darkened hallway. Someone was out there, watching. Aisha's fingers tightened around Jamal's old watch, the worn leather band digging into her palm. Outside, the city lights danced like nothing was wrong. But she knew better. Something was coming. Sleep never came easy for Aisha, not since that night. She lay on her back eyes, tracing the cracks in the ceiling. The echo of sirens burned into memory. Years ago, she'd watched from the stairwell as officers pinned Jamal to the ground outside their family's apartment. His screams, her mother's fists beating on the officers' backs, the neighbors staring but doing nothing. It all lived inside her like a wound that never healed. Aisha had been 14, too young to stop it, old enough to remember every detail. Jamal never made it home. Convicted on falsified testimony, locked away for a crime he didn't commit. 3 years later, he died in a prison fight no one investigated. The report called it an inmate altercation. Her mother called it murder. Silence is complicity, her mother used to whisper, sitting at the kitchen table late at night, cigarette smoke curling around her hair. They count on us being afraid. Aisha never forgot. That whisper became her compass. She joined the force, went into intelligence, worked her way through operations the brass didn't even log officially. All of it just to get closer to the people who buried the truth. Lately, her work had focused on corruption inside the judicial system. Judge Holt was her target, untouchable for years, protected by influence and fear. But now, finally, a breakthrough. Earlier that day, a sealed document had landed on her desk. An internal audit quietly buried showed financial deposits tied to dismissed cases. Holt's signature. Evidence real, dangerous, explosive. But testifying meant revealing everything. Her cover, her identity, maybe her life. She stood in the dark, slid the document into a hidden safe behind the bookshelf, then turned to Lila. "We're doing this." Her voice was low but steady. Tomorrow she would speak. The morning air was heavy, like the city knew something was coming. Aisha dressed carefully, blending in but unmistakably present. No badge, no uniform, just dark jeans, a blazer, and Jamal's watch on her wrist. She'd braided her hair tight out of her face like her mother used to do when she wanted to focus. Lila whined quietly at the door as Aisha grabbed her folder and slipped it into her bag. "Stay," she whispered, pressing a kiss between Lila's ears. She locked the door behind her. Courtroom 3B was colder than she expected, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. The rows of wooden benches were already filled with Holt's usual supporters, judicial aides, lawyers, and those hangers-on who fed from the system's rot. Their eyes followed her as she walked in, curious, suspicious, some openly hostile. Aisha took a slow breath and stepped forward. The bailiff barely looked at her when he said, "You're on the docket for witness testimony." "Yes," she replied. He waved her through, lips tight, not friendly, not neutral. Inside, Judge Raymond Holt sat high on the bench like a monarch in a concrete castle. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair that gave him an undeserved air of wisdom, Holt scanned the room with eyes like razors. "State your name for the record," the court clerk said. "Aisha Carter." The name landed like a spark in a dry field. Holt's head tilted just slightly, recognition flickering behind his practiced mask. His lips curved into that same smirk, the one that had flashed on television the night before. "Ms. Carter," he drawled, his voice coated in false courtesy. "Please proceed." Aisha stepped to the witness stand. Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice even. "I'm here to give testimony regarding irregularities in the prosecution of Case 84672. I believe material evidence was suppressed and the dismissal was intentional." A low murmur stirred the gallery. Holt raised a hand. "Let the witness speak," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. She continued, laying out the connections she'd uncovered between dismissed cases and unexplained financial activity in Holt's name. She was careful didn't reveal her agency affiliation, only her source work and what she could prove. Holt leaned forward slowly, his eyes narrowing. "You speak with great authority for someone with no legal background," he said. "Curious." Aisha didn't blink. "The facts are what matter, not credentials." He smiled, then a cold reptilian thing. "You know Miss Carter," he said, his voice dropping low. "Some people don't know when to stop digging, especially when they're standing in the grave they made for themselves." The courtroom fell silent. Aisha met his gaze. She didn't flinch. "Are you threatening me?" "Your Honor." A few gasps scattered across the room. Holt leaned back, chuckling. "Of course not. I'm merely advising caution. Things have a way of unraveling when lies are introduced into this courtroom." The bailiff shifted uncomfortably. A young man seated in the back row Malik caught Aisha's eye. He looked out of place among the suited men and stiff women. He nodded, barely perceptible, and slipped her a folded note as he passed behind her seat during recess. She unfolded it inside her palm. "Stay strong. Don't stop," court resumed. Holt's questions grew sharper, layered in innuendo. "Have you ever falsified documents in your work?" "Miss Carter, is it true you once used a false identity during an internal investigation?" He was baiting her, trying to force her into discrediting herself. She kept her responses short, measured, but tension pulsed with every exchange. When the recess bell rang again, Holt's final comment hung like a blade in the air. "One more outburst from this witness and I'll hold her in contempt. Speak again," he said, his voice like a hiss, "and you'll wish you hadn't." The gavel cracked. She stepped down from the stand, her legs shaking beneath the weight of it all. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with low voices and darting eyes. The system was watching her now. She could feel it. As she pushed open the exit door into the gray light of afternoon, she felt it deeper in her bones. She was now a threat, not just to Holt, to everything he'd built. And they wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. It began the next morning. The headline flashed across every news outlet: Aisha Carter exposed rogue cop or reckless liar. Someone had leaked her photo, her badge ID, from a restricted database. It was splashed over morning broadcasts, twisted into a narrative of deceit. They called her unstable, said she falsified cases, that she had a vendetta against Judge Holt because her brother had once been convicted in Holt's court. Lies, carefully selected half-truths with venom in every word. She stared at the TV screen in the bodega as the cashier scanned her items with a sideways glance. Lila sat obediently at her feet. Even here in her own neighborhood, people were watching her like she was contagious. When she stepped outside, the feeling followed. A black SUV with tinted windows idled across the street. Its engine rumbled too long to be innocent. She turned sharply down an alley, the same shortcut she used every evening. Footsteps echoed behind her. She grabbed Lila's leash tighter. "Go," she whispered. Lila surged ahead, leading her through a maze of back streets. Behind them, the footsteps quickened. A man shouted a command, not a call. They didn't follow far, but it was enough. Enough to say, "We're watching." That night, her apartment was no longer a home. The door was unlocked, her drawers overturned. Jamal's photo lay on the floor, smeared with ink across his face. "Liar" scrawled in red. The worst blow wasn't the vandalism. It was the missing USB drive. The one she'd kept buried inside a hollowed-out book. Gone. Along with it, one of her strongest pieces of evidence against Holt. A note remained in its place, folded once, elegant handwriting. "Back off, or next time it's Lila." Her breath hitched. Lila growled low and ready, sensing her panic. Aisha pulled the dog close and buried her face in her fur. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "I'm not backing off." She texted Malik using a burner line, "Need to talk. Tonight, no one else." They met in a dark parking garage under an abandoned mall. Malik kept his hood-up eyes shifting nervously. His hands trembled when he handed her a thermos of coffee. "I shouldn't be here," he said, voice hollow. "I got a message from inside. They threatened my sister if I didn't walk away." Aisha's throat tightened. "And you believe them?" He nodded. "They sent me photos, her school, her walk home." Aisha looked at the man she once trusted with her life. His face had changed, haunted, aged. "You're leaving." "I have to." Silence stretched between them. He finally said, "I'm sorry, Aisha, for all of it." She reached for his arm. "You still believe in what we started." He looked at her, eyes full of guilt. "I do. But belief doesn't protect people, and I can't lose her." Aisha let go. She didn't argue, didn't beg, she just stepped back. As he turned to leave, his final words clung to the concrete air. "They won't stop. You know that, right? They'll bleed you out until no one remembers your name." She stared after him long after he disappeared. Back at her apartment, the shadows seemed thicker. Even the light from the street felt colder. She kept Lila close, sat with her back to the wall, her laptop open. The smear campaign had spread. Neighbors didn't make eye contact anymore. One left a note on her door, "Move before we make you." She sat in the dark, running through the case files again, searching for anything she might have missed. Holt's voice echoed in her mind, "You'll wish you hadn't." But she had already wished every night since Jamal's death. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about stopping it from happening to someone else's brother, someone else's child. She turned to Lila and whispered, "It's just us now." The dog nuzzled her hand, loyal and silent. She opened a hidden drive. There were backups. Not everything had been taken. She still had the recordings, still had her notes, still had her fire. They'd stolen her peace, taken her friends, turned the world against her, but they hadn't broken her. Not yet. The video hit the internet like a lightning strike. Aisha was at her kitchen table flipping through court documents when her phone vibrated. Dozens of notifications flooded in at once. She opened the first link. There she was, on a hidden camera feed, talking to a witness, promising protection, calling Holt a criminal in robes. Her voice was clear, her tone urgent, but the video had been edited, spliced, warped to make her look like the aggressor. A rogue agent tampering with evidence, manipulating court witnesses. The leak came from inside her agency. The watermark was unmistakable, and the timing was surgical. Within hours, it went viral. Former undercover agent manipulated court case, public threat, or martyr Aisha Carter. Lied to everyone, even the law. Why wasn't she stopped sooner? The message was clear: discredit her, disown her, destroy her. She barely had time to react before the agency responded with surgical coldness. Her access was revoked, her badge deactivated. An email from Internal Affairs arrived with no warning. "You are suspended from all operations pending investigation. Do not contact agency personnel." She didn't need to contact anyone. She knew who did this. There had been a mole. She'd suspected it for weeks. Small details gone missing, calls, disconnected traces of surveillance where there shouldn't have been any. She reviewed logs and found it Marcus Deneau, her handler, the one who vouched for her entrance into the task force years ago. His signature was all over the leaks. The man she once trusted to keep her alive had sold her out to Holt. That betrayal landed like a knife. But there was no time to process it. 2 nights later, they came for her. She just pulled into a parking garage beneath a shuttered train station to meet a contact. Lila sat quietly in the passenger seat, her ears alert. Aisha sensed at first, the silence. No birds, no echo of traffic, just stillness. Then the headlights flicked on. 3 black sedans, engines revving. She barely had time to react before the first window shattered. Lila barked wildly, lunging toward the back as Aisha dove for her weapon beneath the seat. A bullet struck the metal near her head, sending sparks into the upholstery. She rolled out of the car, grabbing her backpack, using the vehicle as cover. Gunfire echoed. Concrete chipped near her shoulder. Lila darted behind, her teeth bared. Aisha ran blood-pumping, ankle-twisting as she skidded behind a pillar. The sedan's shifted tires squealing, blocking both exits. She reached into her coat, pulling a flash grenade from an emergency strap. No time to aim. She pulled the pin and tossed it wide. The blast gave her 3 seconds of chaos, white light, and panic. Enough to climb onto a loading dock, break a window, and vanish into the underbelly of the building. She didn't stop running until she reached the river. Later, soaked and bruised, she hid in an abandoned ferry shack, Lila panting beside her. She pressed trembling fingers to the gash across her temple. The pain was sharp, but bearable. The real pain was the collapse of everything she'd built. No career, no allies, no protection. Malik was gone, arrested 2 hours after her suspension, charged with aiding and abetting the obstruction of justice. They'd raided his apartment, seized his devices. His name was now smeared alongside hers. And Marcus, her handler, her betrayer, had gone dark. She opened her burner laptop with numb fingers, trying to access her last offline backup. Gone, corrupted, deleted remotely, all except one folder accidentally protected by an encryption key she'd forgotten to remove. She clicked it open. There it was. Audio files, dozens of hours, raw, unfiltered. One in particular stood out, time-stamped a week before. Holt's voice, speaking to Marcus. Get rid of her, quietly. If she talks, we're all finished. Make it look like paranoia. Aisha stared at the screen, trembling. They didn't just want to discredit her. They wanted her erased. She sank to the floor, Lila curling against her side. Blood still dripped down her arm. Her lungs burned. Her body ached. She should have stayed quiet. Should have let it go. But then she saw Jamal's smile in her memory. Heard her mother's voice again. Silence is complicity. She gritted her teeth and opened a new encrypted drive. She dragged the audio file inside, then backed it up twice, one to the cloud, one to a flash drive taped inside Lila's collar. If they came for her again, they wouldn't find her unarmed. They want to fight, she whispered, her voice rough and broken. They'll get one. It wasn't courage that lifted her back to her feet. It was rage. The air in the old ferry shack stank of river rot and oil, but it was quiet and safe for now. Aisha crouched over her laptop, redressing her wound with the last of her gauze, while Lila lay watchful near the door. She hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours. Every bone in her body ached, but her mind was razor sharp. She uploaded the audio file to a private drive, scrambled the IP, then typed a message to one of the last names she trusted, Elena Kwan, an investigative journalist known for exposing police brutality in the '09 East Side trials. They hadn't spoken in years, not since Aisha went deep cover, but they'd once promised each other, "If I ever have something real, I'm coming to you first." She wrote, "Elena, I have something. Holt ordered my execution. Audio attached. You decide what happens next." She hit send. Then she waited. 38 minutes later, Elena replied with only 3 words. "Meet me now." They rendezvoused in an empty garage downtown. Elena, all leather boots and fire in her eyes, stepped from her car with her camera already rolling. "You're sure this is real?" she asked. Aisha nodded, cross-checked the audio. "It's his voice, clear as day." Elena listened, her mouth tightened. When Holt's threat to make it look like paranoia came through the speaker, her eyes flickered with fury. "He planned to disappear you," Elena whispered. "Jesus." Aisha handed over a copy of the audio, and a timeline of connections judges on Holt's payroll, dismissed cases, unexplained campaign donations. "Leak it all today. If I die, make sure it spreads." "I'll do more than that," Elena promised. "I'll bury him." By noon, the file was viral. Holt exposed trended within the hour. Major news outlets picked it up. Protesters began to gather at City Hall and the courthouse demanding answers, demanding justice. Placards read, "No more silent judges and believe Aisha." Her name was no longer taboo. It was a battle cry. But the most unexpected shift came that evening. A quiet knock echoed at Aisha's safe house door. She stiffened, weapon drawn. Lila growled. A voice spoke gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." Aisha peeked through the slot. It was a young woman, maybe early 30s, wearing a courthouse clerk badge. Her hand shook as she held up a phone. "I saw what you did," the woman said. "And I have something you need to see." Inside, the woman introduced herself as Rachel Nunez, a filing clerk who'd worked under Holt for 5 years. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I used to believe in him," she said. "He told us we were cleaning up the streets. But after I saw that clip, what he said about making your death look like mental illness, I couldn't stay quiet." She handed over her phone. It showed a video quietly recorded weeks ago of Holt in his chambers, threatening a defendant who tried to appeal a wrongful conviction. "I don't care what your lawyer says. You open your mouth again and I'll make sure you rot for the rest of your life," Holt barked. It wasn't just damning. It was irrefutable. Aisha stared at the screen, then back at Rachel. "You realize what you're doing, right?" she asked. "He could come after you." Rachel nodded. "I'm tired of being scared." Lila nuzzled her leg as if sensing her nerves. Rachel smiled faintly and stroked the dog's head. "I saw what he did to Jamal," she whispered. "You're not the only one carrying that name." Aisha felt something shift in her chest. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't alone. They leaked the second clip that night. By morning, the courthouse was swarmed with reporters. Protesters chanted for a judicial review. The Bar Association released a statement demanding Holt step down pending investigation. The DA's office announced they were reviewing all convictions tied to Judge Holt over the last 12 years. Still, Holt fought back. A shadow article surfaced in a right-wing tabloid painting Aisha as a radicalized agent with unresolved psychological trauma. A fake psychiatric evaluation was leaked, claiming she was unstable. Her personnel file doctored, circulated across forums, turning trolls loose on her social media. A death threat arrived by email. "You'll go down like your brother. Stop pushing." She stared at it expressionless, then deleted it. At night, while the world burned with outrage and debate, she sat beside Lila in the flickering candlelight and whispered, "They're not just scared of me. They're scared of the truth." Elena called her the next day. "We just got an anonymous donation to cover legal protection for Rachel. Someone in the system wants Holt gone." "Good," Aisha said, "because I'm not done yet." They still had one more card to play. Aisha opened a file on her drive labeled Final Nail. It was the courtroom surveillance she had quietly intercepted after her testimony, the one showing Holt's whispered threat. "Speak again and you'll wish you hadn't." It was time the court saw it too. The courtroom was packed, standing room only. Reporters jostled for space. Protesters waited outside in waves, their chants vibrating through the walls. The judge presiding today, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Evelyn Marr, had stepped in after public pressure forced Holt into temporary suspension. Aisha sat quietly near the front. No more aliases, no disguise. She was fully exposed now, her face, her name, her cause known. But she didn't flinch. Jamal's watch rested on her wrist, and Lila sat just outside the courtroom doors, waiting like always. Across from her sat the prosecution, new faces eager to clean house. Holt's seat at the bench was empty, but his defense attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit, kept checking his phone as if waiting for orders that would never come. Judge Marr tapped her gavel. "We are here to reopen the investigation into judicial misconduct related to former Judge Raymond Holt," she announced. "We will now hear from the first witness." One by one they came. The woman who had lost custody of her children after refusing to donate to a local campaign fundraiser, Holt supported. A teenage boy, now 23, who served 6 years for a theft he didn't commit after refusing to accept a plea, Holt offered under pressure. Then Rachel Nunes, the clerk, who stood tall, hands trembling but voice strong. She testified about the threats, the bribes, the unfiled evidence, the cases redirected to favored attorneys. Aisha watched her with quiet pride, but the room didn't erupt yet. Not until it was Aisha's turn. She stepped forward, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore the truth. And then she opened her laptop. "I submit new video evidence," she said, "retrieved from courthouse surveillance footage from the day of my testimony. This video was captured by the internal camera above the bench." The screen behind her came to life. There was Holt leaning forward during her original appearance. His lips barely moved, but the audio matched perfectly with his words. "Speak again and you'll wish you hadn't." The courtroom gasped. Audible shock rippled through the rows. The footage continued his threatening stare, the intimidation, his private laughter as he cut her off. The defense attorney jumped to object, but Judge Marr overruled him instantly. "I will not have this court silencing a witness in the middle of an active corruption investigation," she said. From there, everything unraveled. Aisha submitted Elena's broadcast, the leaked audio, and the clips from other victims. Her testimony wove it together, the money trails, the court manipulations, the legacy of injustice left in Holt's wake. And then came the final blow. The person who helped him cover it all up, she said, was Marcus Deneau, formerly of Internal Investigations, my handler, my protector. She handed over phone logs, payment receipts, encrypted emails, all traced. Judge Marr leaned back in her chair. "We will issue warrants immediately." Outside, the sound of the crowd grew louder, cheers and cries of disbelief as the trial updates hit news outlets in real time. Back in the courtroom, Aisha felt it. The shift. People who once averted their gaze were now watching her with respect. The clerk who passed her water, the officer standing by the door. Even members of the press lowered their cameras as she stepped down, offering her a moment of dignity. The system had cracked, not completely, not cleanly, but visibly. Truth had found its way in. As she exited the courthouse steps, Lila was waiting. The German shepherd bounded up to her tail, wagging, tongue lolling. Protesters parted to let Aisha through, some clapping, others reaching out to touch her shoulder or offer thanks. She didn't smile, not yet, because justice hadn't been won. But for the first time in her life, it had begun to breathe. Raymond Holt was found guilty on all counts. Bribery, judicial corruption, witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice. The sentence was swift, 20 years without parole. When the verdict was read, the courtroom clapped, a rare moment where justice didn't just whisper but roared. But for Aisha, the noise sounded hollow. She stood outside the courthouse, reporters yelling, her name, cameras flashing like lightning. Her face had become the face of resistance articles, headlines, podcasts, even think pieces analyzing her every move. The woman who brought down the bench. But they didn't see her hands, shaking from nerve damage caused by constant stress and the injury from the parking garage ambush. They didn't hear the silent toll, how she woke in cold sweats, heart pounding at every knock, every creak of the floorboards. They didn't see how she flinched when men in suits walked too close behind her. Her agency made no formal apology. She wasn't reinstated. No medal. No official acknowledgement. Just a quiet agreement not to press charges in exchange for cooperation. They had used her, then discarded her. She cleared out her apartment in silence. The bullet-scarred wall was never repaired. Jamal's photo, now restored in a new frame, went into her bag. She left behind the books, the case files, the echoes of who she used to be. Malik was waiting outside in a beat-up car. He'd been released 2 days after Holt's conviction, all charges dropped. He stepped out, hands in his pockets. "You sure about this?" Aisha nodded. "There's nothing left for me here." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "It's from your mother's church. A donation for you. Small, but it's theirs. Aisha took it with trembling hands. Tell them thank you. They embraced briefly. Malik's voice cracked as he said, You saved more people than you know. She didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She and Lila drove for hours north past the city limits until buildings gave way to fields and the sky opened wide above them. They stopped in a small town with a single grocery store, a wide lake, and more trees than people. A house sat empty on the edge of the woods, offered by a friend of a friend who owed her a favor. That night, she sat on the porch with a blanket over her shoulders, watching the stars. Lila lay curled at her feet, finally resting without twitching at every sound. She opened a journal, wrote a single line. I didn't win, but I didn't lose either. In the distance, wind moved through the trees. No cameras, no chants, no justice speeches. Just silence. The kind she'd earned. Aisha placed Jamal's photo on the windowsill. We did it, she whispered. Not perfectly, not without pain, but they had done it. In the end, she chose peace. Not the kind handed down from a podium, but the quiet that comes after surviving something meant to destroy you. The kind you have to steal back from the world. The system didn't crumble overnight, but it cracked deep enough to let the light in. In the months following Holt's conviction, public pressure forced the Judicial Ethics Board to act. A task force was formed, completely independent, mandated to audit and investigate judges statewide. A new law passed quietly in the Senate requiring all court proceedings to be filmed and stored publicly, a direct response to Aisha's leaked footage. 3 prosecutors resigned under suspicion. 6 wrongfully convicted individuals were released, one of them, a man named Darrell Brooks, who'd spent 11 years inside for a robbery, tied to one of Holt's first bribed rulings. His first interview was emotional. If Aisha Carter hadn't spoken out, he said I'd be growing old in a cell. Her name became more than a name, it became a movement. Not loud, not flashy, but persistent. A group of students at a local university started the Carter Collective, a justice reform initiative focused on whistleblower protection. The website opened with her quote, "Truth doesn't hide forever. Speak it even when your voice shakes." Aisha never returned to the city, but she wasn't forgotten. In her new town, she was just Miss Carter to the kids who saw her walking Lila at sunset. A few neighbors knew the story, but chose not to ask respect wrapped in kindness. One evening, a young woman rang her doorbell. She'd once been a foster child caught in Holt's court, now a social worker. I just wanted to say, thank you. They sat on the porch sharing tea. No press, no ceremony, just 2 survivors recognizing each other. Aisha didn't crave recognition, but one thing still mattered. She returned to the city only once. She wore a hoodie, kept her head down, and stood quietly at the memorial wall for victims of wrongful incarceration, Jamal's name carved in the silver near the center. She laid down fresh flowers, a single white lily, then turned and walked away. The sun broke gently over the hills, golden light spilling across the field like a promise. Aisha stood barefoot in the dewy grass, her arm raised, giving soft commands to Lila as the dog zigzagged through cones. At the edge of the field, a group of young people watched quietly, activists, students, volunteers from the Carter Collective. They had come not for a lecture, but for truth. She turned to face them, her posture, calm presence grounded. I'm not a hero, she began, a voice steady. I didn't do anything magical. I told the truth, and it nearly destroyed me. Silence hung for a moment. But the truth didn't just survive, it multiplied. That's what happens when one person stops being silent. A hand went up. A teenager with dark braids and determined eyes. Weren't you scared? Terrified, Aisha said, smiling faintly, every step. But fear doesn't mean stop. It just means the next step matters more. She walked over to her bag, pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a letter. Not to the press, not to the courts, but to her unborn niece, Jamal's daughter, now carried by his high school sweetheart, who'd reconnected with Aisha after the trial. She read aloud a small piece. One day, someone may try to convince you that staying quiet is safer, that justice is someone else's job. Don't believe them. I walked into the fire so you'd never have to walk in blind, but if you ever do, you'll know you come from fighters. The crowd was silent. Moved. Changed. Lila barked gently, nudging a small girl near the front who smiled and petted her head. The moment was small, but real. Aisha looked over the field, the trees, the students, the future, and in that stillness, one truth stood firm. She hadn't just exposed a monster. She'd planted something stronger. A question. A challenge. A legacy. And now we ask you, what will you do after knowing this story? Will you speak up when it matters? Will you hold the line when silence feels safer? Will you stand even if you stand alone? Because justice doesn't arrive, it is called. It is fought for. It is demanded. So demand it. Like, share, and comment below. Subscribe to the Black Women channel to follow more stories of truth-tellers, fighters, and everyday giants. Be louder than fear. Because someone like Aisha is waiting to know she's not the only one. And now you know.